Hi, everyone. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to our webinar from the Immigrant Justice Corps, talking a bit about the Justice Fellowship. We're really excited to have you. Just some housekeeping before we begin. I think it was in the chat, but yes, attendees are able to sort of ask questions through the Q&A, but we're not sort of sharing the screen since we have some slides to show and some fabulous presenters that you'll be hearing from. We are going to be recording the session. We will be sharing that out to all of you and anyone who registered who's not able to make it. We should also be able to share that out in some social media channels as well. So you can look forward to that if you miss anything during the course of this time. We do have some questions that came in through the registration. We'll be addressing those hopefully through the presentation, but we will have some time at the end to answer your questions if anything specific comes up. And with that, feel free to use that Q&A chat box. That will be monitored, and we will definitely be getting to all of your burning questions. So with that, I will get us started. Again, welcome everyone. We're really excited to be here. You can exactly expect from this webinar a little bit about IJC. There's a lot to talk about, but hopefully we can synthesize some of that. Talk to you a bit about why we exist, what we're hoping to do, and describe some of the key programs in particular. Give you the lowdown on the Justice Fellowship application, which we hope you're all applying for our Justice Fellowship. In addition, sort of the highlight of the show, we want to introduce you to some of our amazing fellows in the field, and you can hear a bit from them about their experience, their placements, and sort of what motivated them to join the fellowship, and again, answer your questions around the fellowship and some of the practical matters. So who you'll hear from today, you're hearing now from me. I'm Christa Stewart. I'm the Deputy Director of Immigrant Justice Corps. With me is also Amy Kimbel, who's our Justice Fellow in the class of 2019, and Anjelika Mantikas, class of 2018. So you'll hear from them, you can see them on the screen, and you'll hear from them a little bit later on in the presentation. So as you may have seen in your research, if you've already applied or are thinking about applying, IJC is an organization that's dedicated towards really implementing the full human rights for everyone in this country, in particular immigrants. We believe that when barriers to immigration status are eliminated, we can all sort of live in a world that we want to live in, one that's free of barriers for those who have different immigration statuses, and that all people will be treated with dignity. So that's sort of the vision we're working towards and why we were formed. In terms of how we get there and sort of the day-to-day work, we recognize that there are a number of different pathways that will get us to that meaningful and lasting change. We know that there are so many different components to making up that change. We know that social norms need to be changed. There's a lot that needs to be done through media and sort of changing the narrative around immigrants. We know that law reform needs to happen. There's been a lot of talk about law reform, and we're really hopeful that that may come to fruition. But just as much as the laws need to be changed, they need to be implemented in a way that's humane. So we also recognize that the judiciary and administrative systems around immigration need to produce that good jurisprudence and equitable determination. Where IJC fits in this sort of these pathways to change is on that sort of direct and individual level, that every immigrant has access to quality legal representation. So our mission in getting us towards that vision of dignity for all is through the direct services that our fellows provide every day. And how we do that, at IJC, we are running this fantastic fellowship, attracting some really phenomenal and skilled practitioners. But we do that through recruiting, through supporting our fellows, and then sort of mobilizing them and putting them in places where hopefully they will thrive. We know that skilled legal representation makes a huge difference in people's lives, and the statistics bear that out. What we are hoping to do is kind of meet that need, sort of the numbers that are needed for representation, as well as sort of the quality legal counsel. We know that there are many failings within our system, but we are so hopeful that the folks that we attract and the folks that we are hopefully supporting in their career pathway will be that change as well. So we do recruit, and you're part of this recruitment session. We recruit promising, committed new lawyers and college graduates with a 2-year fellowship. We offer support through training, through ongoing skills development on a monthly basis, and other kinds of professional development support through our network. One of the wonderful things about the fellowship is the growing alumni corps that is positioned to really provide those kinds of connections, both professionally as well as on a case level in an increased capacity every day. And again, we mobilize. We work really closely with our host organizations to understand where the needs are and how we can help fill the representation gap in different parts of the country. So obviously you're here at the Justice Fellow recruitment portion, so hopefully you're interested in a recent law grad or somebody that has been in a clinic or a fellowship placement for a bit. But we just wanted to let you all know that there is also this community fellowship program that we operate for recent college grads that also provide direct services through the accredited representative program. But for you all on this webinar today, here's some basic statistics around the fellowship. We generally recruit and place about 25 Justice Fellows each year. They do a variety of types of representation, both in the affirmative and defensive setting. Again, it is a 2-year secured placement. It's a bit different than other kinds of fellowships that you may be familiar with, like that have you kind of do your own selection of an organization. We do that sort of pre-matching for you and identify the organizations that you are likely to succeed in and do a matching process. Lastly, some information that is useful is that there is a guaranteed minimum salary and benefits. Of course, with each organization, that could be a floor, and you could make potentially more depending on the organization that you ultimately choose to go to. As mentioned, Justice Fellows do provide a broad range of immigration services. This is kind of a recent snapshot of what the Fellows have been working on in the field, and often there could be a real variety of caseload even within one practice, but you'll see the breakdown here is focused on sort of both humanitarian type work as well as removal work and sort of immigration court work, as well as sort of a mix of other kinds of cases. So depending on the organization you go to or your particular practice desires, you may be focusing on the kinds of cases that have been in the news really recently in terms of providing asylum, or you may be working with vulnerable populations like children and pursuing special immigrant juvenile status, et cetera. Or you may decide to work in an organization that is primarily a public defender organization and provide representation for people that are in removal proceedings and have criminal matters as well. And again, sort of building off that, here are some of our organizations that we've worked with traditionally in the past. And there, again, is a real diversity of experiences across our organizations. The sort of cornerstone for all of them are that we assess their ability to provide really key and good supervision to newer practitioners. But again, they differ by location, they differ by client focus and geographic catchment. Again, they could potentially differ by the issue focus. Some are really dedicated to a particular population being served. And there may also be differences in terms of the style or the kind of organizational style. Some are real traditional legal services organizations. Some, again, as I mentioned, are defender organizations, and some are community-based organizations. So I think there's a real range from which to choose from and sort of how you might want to experience your first few years in practice. IJC had its origins in New York City and has, in the past 7 or so years has really seen the need to provide representation across the nation. So moving from New York City, we have expanded. Right now we're in 33 cities, as you can see in this graphic, and we've really focused on areas that are unrepresented and where new practices are developing to provide representation in the field. And as you can imagine, over the past number of years, there has been a real crisis providing representation in the detention setting. So we've been focusing on expanding a bit in those areas. We've worked with over 42 host organizations, and we're really happy that we believe sort of those kinds of placements and the support that we offer have allowed our fellows to stay in the field. So you can see that 90% of our justice fellows are currently practicing in the immigration field. So we feel that retention rate really does speak to the quality of the organization that fellows are working with and the experience that they've been able to get through the fellowship. And now for sort of the best part of the presentation, I'd love to turn it over to our current Justice Fellows so you can get a bit of a sense of sort of their background, you know, what motivated them to join immigration law and the fellowship in particular. So I will turn it over to Amy Kimbel.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I can just share maybe a little bit about my process of deciding to apply for the fellowship. I think between my maybe second summer and my third year of law school, I was kind of pivoting and deciding that I wanted to do immigration. Before that, I didn't have really any immigration experience, but I had some experience working with in Latin America. So once I thought like, okay, I think I want to do immigration, I felt like I needed kind of the training and support of the fellowship. So as I was applying to this fellowship, I was also doing like an externship, my 3L year at a nonprofit, but that was my only kind of immigration experience. And I've been at the Florence Project in Arizona, and it's been great in terms of that experience and training that I was really hoping to gain from the fellowship. I think my organization has offered just really comprehensive mentorship and really thorough, deep knowledge of immigration. Like there's always someone that I can ask. And the fellowship has then been like another layer, right, of training, of supervision, even of mentorship. When I have a question that I'm not getting answered at my host organization, I can ask through the IJC listserv. I can ask, so that's been a little bit about my experience. I'm also really happy to answer your questions later in the webinar.
Great. Anjelika, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Anjelika. I'm a third-year Justice Fellow. So after my second year, I applied for a third-year position, which meant that IJC would sponsor like half of the fellowship money, and then the organization that I worked at would have to come up with the other half. So I've been at Make the Road, New Jersey for 3 years. We're a community-based organization in New Jersey. So I can talk a little bit, I guess, about what motivated me and like how the experience has been. So I attended an IJC presentation in person at my law school, the same way that you guys are attending virtually. And I just felt like it really was great to see that it's more of like a community of like recent law graduates and new attorneys that want to be doing immigration work at like nonprofits and are committed to public interest. And I feel like that was something that I wanted to do. And I also was really attracted to like the training that the IJC team like provides at the beginning of the fellowship, because it's like a few weeks to a month of like really intense training, not just on immigration law, but also like how to work with vulnerable populations, and also like to practice self-care when you're working with people who like experienced a lot of trauma. And so 3 years in, it's been like a really rewarding experience. at my host organization, I have a wonderful supervisor, and she's really just like allowed me to take on like any cases that I felt like were challenging and that I wanted to do. That obviously met like the idea of like working on a complex matter. And I knew like I've been like always reaching out. I feel like I really often reach out on our listserv of fellows that Amy had mentioned, like just to ask questions and like get people's opinions on like situations. And it's just been nice to have that community. And I've also just like made a lot of like long lasting friendships through IJC, because you're really like the people that you do the fellowship with, like you're all really kind of going through it, right? Like, especially at the beginning, like our immigration system is so complicated, and you have people that you can like bond with and then also like go out with and forget like about all of the work that you have to do. And I guess I could just say like, I know some people had asked this question, like when I was applying for IJC, I really tried to highlight my direct service experience. And so I would really suggest for other people to try to get experience like in a clinic or even like volunteering. Like it's so easy to volunteer now at different nonprofits around the country because it's remote work, and working with individuals who need like direct service help. And also like trying to take language classes, which I feel like are really important to work with the clients. There's also so many language classes that are virtual now because of the pandemic. So those are two things I tried to do, and think it would be helpful for other people.
Anjelika, not to put you on the spot, but before the pandemic, you were able to take advantage of one of our remote rapid response opportunities. I wonder if you just would speak just shortly about that.
Sure. That was like on my list, but I didn't know how long I could talk. So what was really great before the pandemic, it was in June 2019, right when it was like very hectic at the US-Mexico border. We were actually able to go I was part of one of the teams they sent, you guys sent a few teams, IJC did, to volunteer for a week with an organization called Al Otro Lado, which is in Tijuana. And we got to meet with individuals who were waiting for their chance to enter the United States to seek asylum. And so basically, like, we helped by listening to their situation, explaining what asylum law was, and like trying to advise them about like what could happen, right? Like there was a possibility people could get separated from their children. There was a possibility of being detained. There was a possibility of being placed in the Migrant Protection Protocol program, which everyone should like look up. It was so evil, MPP. And so we were able to like work through IJC. Like they gave us that opportunity to go down there and do that type of work. It was really meaningful, and like it's definitely like an experience that I will like forever remember. So it was a great opportunity like through the Immigrant Justice Corps.
And sort of picking up on that work, Amy is is our inaugural fellow at the Florence Project, doing really important detention work, and wondering if you wouldn't mind talking just quickly about what it's like to be sort of a fellow at a new host organization.
Yeah, so I do mostly detained work, and that's because that's the Florence Project's mission, is to serve the 4 detention centers in Arizona. I think being a fellow at an organization has been a really positive experience for me. It probably does depend a lot on the organization. I think IJC vets them pretty thoroughly and tries to make sure that you're going to have a good experience. But yeah, it felt to me like everything was smooth. And although I didn't have like another fellow to learn from, I did have, many other staff members, both kind of starting at the same time and a couple of years above me that I could still learn from in the same ways.
Great, thanks. So I think right now we'll move on to some of the other portions of the presentation, and of course, why IJC. I think you heard a lot about that from our two panelists. But in particular, we like to think, and Christa, you can move to the next slide, that we are a bit different from other fellowships in that we pride ourselves on trying to offer state-of-the-art training from practitioners in the field and sort of experts in the field that we're able to draw upon. We do a really immersive training that's actually this year starting in about 2 weeks. That lasts for almost a full month, 3 weeks to a month. Of course, we are still in the remote setting, so doing that remotely this year, but it's a fantastic opportunity for those that may not have had as broad experience in immigration in law school or in sort of their postgraduate work to get sort of that basis. It also is again, a great exposure to some experts in the field and sort of the variety of practice areas that are available as an immigration practitioner. Following that, we do have monthly trainings and monthly meetings to kind of keep folks up to date on immigration law and policy developments. As you can imagine, the past administration, those changes were fast and furious, so it was really wonderful to come together to kind of parse those out and think through a strategy in terms of how to address them. We've also been holding biannual conferences. We are hoping, even though the training this fall is remote, that we may be in a position to bring folks together this winter and perhaps going forward. But again, the pandemic has put a bit of wrench in our plans on that. We do offer a signing bonus of $1,000 when you become a fellow. It's basically to demonstrate how excited we are to have a new cohort of fellows joining us. We also offer paid graduate school prep courses, especially for those in the undergrad track through the community fellowship and exam fees. For any documented fellows, we also offer application fees and renewals. We also have a support plan, as some of you may know, that has been really touch and go, unfortunately, through the past year or so. But we do have a plan in place for those that are documented should they lose work authorization. We also have a working DACA fellow staff group that comes together to think about ways to support our DACA fellows. Also, there are a lot of great ways to interact with IJC's larger community. We have an advisory committee that brings together both staff, current fellows, alumni, and board members to sort of look at how we can improve IJC in our day-to-day work and sort of things to be aware of. We've initiated some wellness efforts, particularly since the start of the pandemic, to bring folks together. We have what we call community pods and have some cohort subgroups that meet together. We offer a book club, some yoga offerings, even though they're online, they are well attended, and a Headspace subscription for those that may not be as familiar. It's sort of a meditation app and wellness app. So those are some of the things we feel make us a bit different than the sort of regular fellowship you may be pursuing as a legal professional. And as I mentioned, we do start off our beginning cohorts with an intensive immigration training, and those are really designed to both, again, expose new fellows to different areas of work, but also to kind of have the learning start together as a group, because as you heard from the fellows, so much of the learning does happen within the group as a whole. And again, we do offer that ongoing monthly training and also some professional development opportunities in terms of different practice areas, connecting folks up to things that they may look at after the fellowship ends, after the 2 years. As you can sort of imagine, we do quite a bit of working with our graduating fellows to make sure that they are well situated as they embark upon their careers. A lot of organizations or a lot of fellows, well, definitely organizations are trying to retain our fellows. As you've heard, we also offer a bridge for some fellows that the organization intends to hire but may not have sort of full funding to bring them on. So we offer some limited third-year options for some fellows. But again, we really pride ourselves on the growing network that we have of immigration providers, both organizations and individuals, and that's a real, I think, key component of the IJC fellowship. We also do some really fun things. We have some, social activities. Again, a lot of those have moved to the remote world. We have a rotating sort of set of office dogs that make an appearance and brighten everybody's day. We also, tend to come together around holidays and also some challenging times. I know after this election, we had a series of opportunities for folks to come together and just sort of process some of those events. But we are really, one of the best parts of the fellowship is working through, that day-to-day learning with other fellows and sort of the bonds that you form. On to the sort of nuts and bolts of the application itself and sort of the criteria. We are obviously looking for applicants who are sort of currently enrolled or at this point sort of graduating this coming spring. You of course can have graduated if you've been involved in a clerkship or fellowship since graduating law school. So we do have a window of time within which people can apply. If there has been sort of ongoing education or professional development for that sort of 2-year window. So I know that that was a question that was asked, and hopefully that gets at that person's question around sort of eligibility requirements. In terms of the elements, and you'll be able to see the application through the portal right on our website, we've tried to make it as user-friendly as possible and keep it to sort of the essential elements where you would submit a resume, an unofficial law school transcript, a statement of interest, an essay question, and 2 letters of recommendation. The sort of written component, the statement of interest and the essay question, we try to keep as short as possible. It's about 500 words, I believe, for each of those, because we know that with the start of law school, with other people perhaps working, that you're probably challenged with time, and we want to make it as sort of as easy to access as possible. And we often get asked sort of what we're looking for. Is there a particular grade point average? Are there particular experiences that we're looking for? Essentially, we are looking for folks that are intelligent, thoughtful, people that are really committed and dedicated to both immigrant justice and the idea of a fellowship program. For instance, some folks recognize that they're sort of more individualistic and are, fine operating kind of in their own career trajectory. So we are looking for people that, feel that the fellowship may be a benefit to them in a particular way. We're looking for sort of creative, empathetic, compassionate people. Ideally, we do look for applicants who speak another language, only because that is sort of the major request of our host organizations, although it's not required. There are definitely other organizations that have the capacity to offer those kinds of translation or interpretation services for folks that don't speak another language. But essentially what it boils down to is looking for folks that want to pursue a future working in this field. And again, that doesn't mean that you need to have any kind of prerequisite of showing that. It's helpful to show that you've perhaps worked towards that, but again, we'll be basing it on the application itself. Just some tips, which I'm sure you are mindful of already, but again, just proofread it. It really does help to get a second pair of eyes to review your materials before they get uploaded. We do recommend you get personal and thoughtful. We want to know sort of why you should sort of be part of this fellowship and why your individual qualities and assets are putting you in this path. One of our biggest hangups generally has been around recommendations. As you saw as part of the component, there are 2 recommendations that are required. The full application can't be uploaded until you have those recommendations. So we really recommend that you reiterate and gently remind your recommenders to get those uploaded. We also get questions about sort of who is the best recommender. Again, that's really folks that know you the best and can express why the qualities you have and the skills you have would make you a great fellow. So there's no formula around, whether it should be a workplace recommendation or an academic recommendation. Again, I would choose folks that really know you well. And a note on language abilities, and we just talked about that a bit ago. It's important to be candid, I think, around your language abilities. If you feel that those language abilities are basic, but there perhaps is a plan to work on them over, the course of the year, let us know what that might be. But there is a language testing component through the interview process, and we want to make sure that we are accurately assessing folks and basing that on sort of the abilities that you indicate. In terms of our selection process, here's a snapshot of sort of where things will play out. Our application portal does close on October 15th at 11:59. That's Eastern Standard Time, so folks on the West Coast have a little bit of wiggle room there. And again, you want to make sure all of your materials are submitted by that deadline. We then convene a selection committee, and that's comprised of former fellows, host organization staff, and other stakeholders like law professors or folks in nonprofits to read and grade those applications. We get a good number of applications, so that selection committee sort of helps us go through them and assess which ones we should move forward. We then roughly invite 50 to 60 interviewers to come in remotely to meet with IJC staff and fellows. Out of that, we have a group of finalists that are chosen. Again, that number is about 25 with an additional 10 placed on a wait list because we know that a lot of you have a lot of other opportunities as well. Then we go into matching in December, where again you get information about the host organizations, and we arrange a process, which I'll talk about in just a moment, and then offer letters are sent out. And then in September, we would welcome you all to our fall training. So that's kind of a rough overview of the time frame that we are working within. So here is a bit more information on that host organization matching. And again, IJC, as you heard, does a little bit of the magic in-house. Basically how that works is that finalists are able to rank the host organizations that they might intend to go to based on the type of case work that is offered, on the supervision structure and sort of the type of organization, and of course a pay is a consideration as well. So you would get all of that information and sort of make those rankings. The hosts on their end are also looking at sort of the statements that you all would make as to why you would be a good fit with that host organization. They'd look at your resume, and then they would sort of also do their rankings as well. Here's where IJC comes in, where we kind of take both of those results, try to match them up as best as possible, and looking at sort of the host organization needs, the applicant's interests, and also experience, and also some of our kind of overarching goals as well. And we sort of put that together and make tentative offers. So those tentative offers are essentially a week for each party to decide whether it's a good match. At that point, we do sort of put you in touch with people at the host organization. If there's a current fellow or a former fellow, we put you in touch to get a sense of what it's like to work on the ground at that organization. And of course, the host has an opportunity to meet you as well. So once accepted on both sides, the offer's final, and hopefully we move on to the next part of welcoming you to the fellowship. And this slide, again, just gives you the application information. Again, it does close October 15th. We really encourage you to get those in before 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We often get a flurry of emails at 11:48 with some glitches. So we really do encourage you to try to get that uploaded and out as soon as possible. And again, that's a joke, to apply soon and often. We just want one application from you, and we're sure it will be a fantastic one. So this is the part of the session where we open it up for questions, and we can take a look and see what questions you have. If there are some, again, this recording will be sent out to anyone that's attended and other applicants or registrants. If there are questions you think of after this presentation, feel free to send them over to info@justicecorps.org, the email that's listed right on that page. So I can sort of go through some of the questions, and I think one of the questions I guess was already answered in terms of what looks different in terms of a fellowship position versus a staff attorney position. I think that has been answered. And there is, again, a question here that I think we answered about graduating in May 2020 in that 2-year window. There is the question about the prep courses and exam fees, whether that applies to law students or those in undergrad. I mean, there is, we have not had the occasion to offer that with Justice Fellows because most have decided to stay within the legal profession. So at this point, it generally does just apply to those in the undergrad track. Although we do have a fellow, I think this year, that's going on to a master's degree, but did not approach us about that sort of graduate fee. There was a question about how do we get the application, and hopefully we answered that. That's, again, on our website and through that link that you just saw. Somebody asked about the language testing process. Is it a written exam, a conversation, or something else? That is a live language sort of test during the interview process. Overall, the interview process is pretty short. It's about 25 minutes or so, and the language testing occurs during that interview. If there are sort of questions or concerns with the language testing and people feel it needs to be probed a bit more, we would set up an additional time to do more examination on the language testing, but thanks for that question. Another question is, if the fellow and host organizations don't end up as a good match, what happens? We hope that things do work out. We have set up a check-in system so that we are very much in touch with our fellows to make sure that the supervision they're receiving is adequate, that the experience overall is one that's supportive. If it turns out that it's not a good match, what we have done in the past is explore with the fellow, you know, what might the causes be, work with them to see if it is something that is that can be addressed. If it is something that cannot be addressed, we often look for perhaps other placements within our network, or unfortunately, in some cases, some fellows do go on to full-time employment or a different career situation. So that's what happens if they don't end up as a good match. And somebody's asking if applications are reviewed on a rolling basis, but right, they're not reviewed on a rolling basis right now. Right now, we are reviewing them after they're all received on October 15th. So I think that may be all of the questions that we received in the chat. I'm not sure if there's any other sort of additional questions that folks have, or if we have addressed anything, or if my fellow panelists wanted to sort of pick up on anything that was addressed at this point.
I think I would just echo what Anjelika said about, I think we got the question before the webinar of like, what did you try to do to stand out in your application? And I totally agree with what she said, that I think it's important to talk about direct services experience if you have it, and just to kind of help IJC understand that you do want to be a direct services attorney. I think sometimes attorneys try out direct services and realize they don't like it. And so if you've done it before and you know this is what you want to do, then, you know, by all means share that. That was really similar for me and for Anjelika.
Great. There was actually a clarification about the match, and I'm sorry. I think I went to a longer term match. So you were asking about the fellowship during the matching process not being great. So yes, so after that 1 week period, there is the opportunity to match again, but there's no guarantee that there would be sort of an additional match, if that makes sense. Because what we do try to do is ensure that everyone who's in the placement has sort of the best potential match. There have been situations though where the candidate declines a particular host organization, and there was sort of a secondary placement that worked out. So hopefully that answers your question. Great. Wonderful. I think it seems like there aren't any other questions coming through. We really hope that you apply. We are really looking forward to seeing some of your fantastic applications. And really, thank you so much for your time this evening, and thank you especially to our fantastic fellows that are doing such great work in the field. And it looks like there may be a quick other question, but I haven't. Here we go. No. Okay, sorry. I think that may have been all of the questions. Oh, sorry. There was one last question. If LLMs are eligible, yes, absolutely. LLMs are eligible to apply. So wonderful. Have a great evening. And again, thanks to Anjelika and Amy for their fantastic presentations tonight, and also for all the fantastic work they are doing day to day. So have a wonderful evening.